The wind came screaming down from the northern ridge, tearing across the open plains like a devil let loose. It clawed at the earth, howling through naked branches and swirling snow into blinding sheets. Beneath a bruised sky, 3 children trudged through the blizzard, their figures small and trembling against the weight of winter. Wyatt Walker led the way, his jaw clenched, his face raw with cold. 13 and already hardened by loss, he gripped his little brother's hand, pulling him forward with determination born of desperation. Behind him, Mabel, 10, clutched the straps of the tattered satchel on her back. Her cheeks were chapped red, her lips cracked, but she didn't complain. She never did. Not in front of Jude. Jude, only 6, stumbled with each step. He barely had strength left to walk. His breath came in short, wheezing gasps and his eyes were half-lidded. A faded scarf, once their mother's, was wrapped around his neck, and his threadbare coat hung from him like a wet rag. Wyatt adjusted his grip, hoisting the boy onto his back without missing stride. "There," Mabel called out, her voice nearly lost in the wind. She pointed toward a dark shape nestled in the lowland. A barn, abandoned, leaning to one side, roof bowed in the middle like an old man with secrets. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. They made it just as Jude stopped moving entirely. Wyatt slammed his shoulder into the wooden door, half frozen and hanging crooked on rusted hinges. It groaned open with a reluctant screech, revealing a hollowed-out interior filled with straw, broken tools, and the sharp, bitter smell of rot. It was dry at least. Mostly. Inside, the wind still whispered through the slats in the walls, but the worst of the snow stayed out. Wyatt lowered Jude gently onto a pile of hay, removing his coat to cover the boy. His own teeth began to chatter, but he ignored them. He always ignored himself. Mabel knelt beside Jude, placing a hand on his forehead. "He's burning up." "He'll be all right," Wyatt said, though he didn't believe it. He found an old feed sack in the corner and began gathering dry bits of hay and splintered wood. His hands were stiff, fingers numb, but he worked quickly. When he finally got a spark from the flint, it caught with a stubborn flicker. They huddled close to the tiny fire, the flames licking the cold from their faces, though the barn around them stayed cruelly frigid. "Tell me a story, maybe," Jude whispered, voice barely there. Mabel smiled gently, eyes shimmering. "Once upon a time there was a wolf so big, it swallowed the whole sky. But it had a bellyache, 'cause it didn't chew. So a brave knight climbed up a ladder made of stars and tickled its belly from the inside." Wyatt tuned her out, not because he didn't care, but because he needed to listen. To the wind, the woods, the emptiness beyond. Anything could be out there. Men worse than wolves. He'd seen what people turned into when winter stretched too long and food ran out. Their parents had died only 21 days ago. That's how long he'd been counting, each sunrise like a punch to the gut. Ma went first, coughing blood into rags. Then Pa 2 days later. Folks in town shut their doors, afraid of sickness. Wyatt begged. Mabel pleaded. Jude just cried. They were told to leave before more got infected. He remembered the sheriff, standing there like stone, telling them to head south where it was warmer. No escort. No supplies. Just the wind and a warning, you stay, you die. Wyatt had decided then that no one was going to save them. No God, no man. Just him. The fire cracked. Jude was asleep now, lips parted, chest rising shallowly. Mabel sat with her arms around her knees, still rocking gently as if she could will warmth into her bones. She looked at Wyatt. He's getting worse. I know. If we don't find a doctor soon. I said I know. Mabel flinched but didn't say anything more. Wyatt felt the sharp sting of guilt, but it was swallowed by fear. Real fear. Not the kind you name. The kind that gnaws from the inside and lives in your breath. Snow began to leak through the gaps in the roof. The fire sputtered. We can't let it go out, Mabel said, moving to add more scraps. We don't have enough for the night, Wyatt said. It won't last anyway. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind and the occasional groan of the old barn settling deeper into its grave. Mabel's voice came softly. Do you think they're warm? Ma and Pa? He didn't answer. She tried again. I hope they are. Wherever they are. Don't, Wyatt said. Don't start that. I'm just saying. They're gone, he snapped. That's it. No heaven. No place. Just gone. Mabel's eyes filled, but she blinked hard and bit her lip. You don't mean that. He turned away, shame curling in his chest. He did mean it. But not because he wanted to. Because believing in anything else hurt too much. A sudden sound made him freeze. It was low. Rustling. Just outside the barn. He motioned for Mabel to stay quiet and moved to the door, grabbing a rusted pitchfork from the wall. His hands trembled, not just from cold. He waited, ears straining. Crunch. A slow, deliberate step in the snow. Something sniffed. Then a low growl. Not human. Wolves. There wasn't just one. Maybe two or three. Drawn by the scent of smoke and weakness. The fire was too small to frighten them off for long. And they were out of food. If the wolves were hungry enough. Wyatt's grip tightened. What is it? Mabel whispered. He didn't turn. Stay with Jude. A shape moved past the broken window, a gray blur against the white. Then another. A snarl. Wyatt took a deep breath. If he had to fight, he would. He wouldn't let them take his brother. Or Mabel. He stepped outside, boots crunching into the snow. The cold hit like a slap, but adrenaline shoved it back. There were three. Lean, skeletal wolves. Their eyes burned yellow in the dim. One padded closer, lips peeled back. Another began circling. Wyatt raised the pitchfork. His arms ached just from holding it. The wolf growled, low and menacing. And then, a sound cracked across the land. Bang. One wolf dropped. Bang. Another yelped and fled. The third scrambled into the trees. Wyatt spun around, breath catching. A figure stepped from the woods, rifle still raised. Tall, broad, hat low. A long coat whipping in the wind. For a second, Wyatt thought it was a dream. Or a ghost. But the man's voice was real and gruff. You all right, boy? Wyatt didn't answer. His throat was dry. Behind him, the barn door creaked. Mabel peeked out, eyes wide. The man lowered his rifle. You kids alone out here? Wyatt nodded, still gripping the pitchfork. The man studied him, then looked past him toward the barn. That little one sick? Again Wyatt nodded. The man sighed, stepping forward. He didn't smile, but something in his face softened. I ain't gonna hurt you. Name's Harlan. My wife's back at our cabin, about a mile east. She'll know what to do. Wyatt hesitated. His arms shook. You come now, Harlan said, voice firmer, or that boy won't make it till morning. Silence again. Then Mabel spoke, voice small. Are you angels? Harlan looked at her for a long moment. No, miss. Just folks who hate to see children dying in the cold. Wyatt dropped the pitchfork. He didn't trust the man. Not yet. But he didn't have a choice. He turned to Mabel. Help me get Jude. Together they lifted their brother, wrapping him in every scrap they had. Harlan led the way, rifle still in hand, always scanning the woods. The snow kept falling, but it didn't seem so endless anymore. Behind them the fire died. But ahead, somewhere just past the tree line, a light flickered. Warm and waiting. The cabin stood at the edge of the forest, squat and sturdy, with smoke curling from its chimney like a promise. Inside it smelled of pine wood, boiled coffee and lemon soap, clean, warm and still. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing golden light across the floorboards. Every window had been thickly shuttered against the storm, but the walls seemed to hum with quiet, patient life. Nora Aldridge stirred the stew pot one last time before lifting it from the stove. Her hands, though rough from work, moved with careful grace. She set the pot down and listened, not to the wind, which howled against the shutters, but to the silence behind it. A silence she had lived with for years. She walked to the narrow hallway, where a small wooden cradle sat untouched beneath a patchwork quilt. The room around it was neat, prepared, but unused. A pair of knitted booties rested on the edge of the cradle, their blue yarn faded from waiting too long. Nora lingered only a moment. She touched the cradle's edge as she passed, then went to lay the table. 2 bowls as always. Outside the door creaked open. She turned. Harlan entered, stomping snow from his boots. His face was cold-bitten, the brim of his hat crusted with frost. But his eyes were urgent, alert. Nora straightened. You were gone long. I found something. He didn't remove his coat. Just set the rifle against the wall. Nora's heart jumped. Something? Someone, he corrected, meeting her gaze. 3 kids. They were holed up in the old Tilson barn. One of them sick. Bad off. Dear God, she breathed, already moving toward the cupboard. You brought them here? They're behind me. A few minutes out. She grabbed extra bedding, unrolling blankets and shaking the dust free. Why didn't you bring them straight in? They were scared, Harlan said. Didn't trust me. Boy had a pitchfork in his hand. She looked up sharply. How old? 13 maybe. Girl's a few years younger. Little one can't walk. I think he's got fever. Nora's mouth tightened, but her hands kept moving. We'll need hot water. And we'll have to strip him down, check for rash wounds. Harlan nodded and moved to stoke the fire higher. The boy, he looks like he ain't slept in a month. And he's got that stare. What kind? The kind that says he doesn't expect much from the world anymore. Nora didn't reply. She knew that look too well. Outside, the door opened again, and the wind carried in 3 small figures. Wyatt stepped inside first, shielding Jude with his body. His eyes darted to the corners, assessing. Mabel followed, dragging their small pack, her boots soaked through. Her lips parted in awe as warmth embraced her. Nora approached gently. Come in. Come on now. It's all right. Wyatt hesitated, arms still wrapped around Jude, who clung weakly to his neck. Then he stepped forward, letting Nora guide them toward the fire. Jude whimpered at the heat but didn't wake. Mabel stood nearby, shivering, her hands clenched to her sides. Nora knelt, touching Jude's face with careful fingers. He's burning up. Wyatt flinched. Don't touch him, he doesn't like strangers. I'm a nurse, she said softly. Or I used to be. I just want to help. Wyatt held her gaze, then nodded once. Lay him on the cot, she instructed. Mabel, is it? Can you help me get his coat off? Mabel nodded quickly, voice cracking. Yes, ma'am. As Nora and Mabel undressed the boy, Harlan poured hot water into a basin. Wyatt stood rigid, watching every movement. Jude's chest rose and fell with difficulty. His ribs showed through pale skin. Purple shadows ringed his eyes. Nora touched his neck, then gently lifted an eyelid. He's dehydrated. And cold. This fever's not from infection. It's his body trying to fight the freeze. If he makes it through the night, he might stand a chance. Mabel's face crumpled. She looked to Wyatt, but he didn't move. Nora reached for a cloth. We'll keep him warm, keep his skin damp. That's all we can do now. Can't you give him medicine? Mabel asked. We're days from a town. But we've got some herbs. Feverfew, elder root. I'll make a tonic. Wyatt finally spoke. You really know what you're doing? Nora didn't look offended. Enough to try. He nodded, quiet again. Harlan approached him. You eat yet? Wyatt shook his head. Not since yesterday. Harlan gestured toward the table. Sit. Wyatt didn't move. It's stew, the older man added. Not poison. Wyatt's eyes narrowed, but his stomach betrayed him with a growl. He walked to the table and sat, shoulders still hunched like he expected to be hit. Mabel joined him. She stared at the bowl like it was a dream. They ate in silence for a moment, spooning hot broth into mouths that hadn't tasted comfort in days. Nora moved around the room, adding logs to the fire, boiling herbs, checking Jude's breath every few minutes. Her movements were steady, rhythmic, born from habit she hadn't used in years. Harlan watched her, leaning against the doorway. They're orphans, he said quietly. Folks in town ran them off. Nora didn't look up. Typical. Girl asked if I was an angel. That made Nora pause. She looked at him, her eyes full of something tender and sad. And what did you say? I said no. Good, she murmured. That would have been a lie. Wyatt overheard. We don't need your pity. Harlan raised an eyebrow. Didn't offer any. Then why help us? Because the alternative was burying you. Wyatt said nothing. Mabel glanced between them, tension thick in the room. She nudged Wyatt's arm. We can stay here, can't we? We're not staying, he said quickly. Just till Jude's better. Nora turned to him, her voice calm but firm. You'll stay as long as he needs. And when he's strong enough, you can decide what's next. Wyatt bristled. We don't take charity. Then consider it repayment, Harlan said. For not having to shoot you. That earned a small huff from Mabel, almost a laugh. Even Wyatt's shoulders eased slightly. The rest of the evening passed in slow, quiet hours. Nora sang under her breath as she stirred the tonic. Mabel helped her crush dried herbs with a mortar and pestle, listening intently. Jude stirred once or twice but didn't wake. Wyatt never sat far from him. Later, Harlan handed Wyatt a worn wool blanket. You sleep near the fire. Cold's gonna turn mean tonight. Wyatt hesitated, then took it. Before settling down, he looked toward Nora, who was tucking extra padding around Jude. Thank you. She looked up, surprised. You're welcome, she said. Mabel curled beside her brother, finally closing her eyes. Her breathing evened out. Wyatt stayed awake longer, staring into the flames. Harlan poured himself a mug of coffee and stood beside Nora. You think they'll make it? She followed his gaze. He's strong. All of them are. But that kind of strength, it comes from pain. Harlan nodded. Boy doesn't trust anyone. He will, she said. When he's ready. They stood in silence for a while. Then Nora turned toward the hallway, her eyes flicking toward the quiet room where the cradle sat. "You still think we weren't meant to raise a child?" she asked quietly. "I think life ain't about what's meant," Harlan said. "It's about what shows up." She didn't reply. Just laid a hand gently on Jude's forehead. Outside, the storm howled louder, but inside the cabin the fire never went out. Morning came slow and gray, with a stubborn sun peeking between frost-laced clouds. The storm had passed, but the world outside the cabin was frozen still, wrapped in a heavy white silence. Inside, the fire burned low, casting amber shadows across the wooden walls and illuminating the still forms sleeping on the floor. Wyatt stirred first. He sat up abruptly, heart hammering as if expecting to find the warmth gone, the cabin vanished, and the cold creeping back into his bones. But the fire still crackled. Jude still breathed. And for the first time in weeks, the weight pressing down on his chest had lifted, just slightly. He got to his feet, moving with the practiced quiet of someone who didn't want to wake the dead. He stepped over Mabel, who was curled in a cocoon of blankets, face tucked against the floor. Jude lay on the cot, pale but no longer ghostly. His fever had broken sometime in the night. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his breaths came deeper now, more evenly. Wyatt touched his brother's wrist. Still warm. Still alive. A sharp breath escaped him, half a sigh, half a sob, though he quickly crushed it. He didn't cry. Not anymore. In the kitchen, Nora was already awake. She moved with quiet efficiency, pouring hot water into a basin, grinding dried roots into a powder. She glanced over her shoulder when she heard him. "Fever's down," she said. He nodded. "I saw." She handed him a cup. "Drink. It's not coffee, but it'll warm you." He took it, sipping the bitter broth without question. "Thank you. For everything." Nora smiled faintly. "You don't have to keep saying that." "I do," Wyatt said. "Because people don't usually help us." She sat beside the stove, her hands in her lap. Maybe they didn't know how. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. They knew. They just didn't want to. Nora didn't argue. She understood that kind of wound, one too deep for time to smooth over. A soft sound behind them. Mabel sat up, hair tangled, eyes blinking against the light. "Is it morning?" Wyatt nodded. "Storm's gone." Mabel rubbed her eyes. "Did Jude wake?" "Not yet." She got up and padded over to the cot, brushing the hair from her brother's face. "He's not cold anymore." "No," Nora said gently. "He's fighting." Mabel looked up. "You think he'll win?" Nora knelt beside her. "I do." Outside, boots hit the porch steps. Harlan entered, cheeks pink from cold, arms full of chopped wood. "Good news," he said as he unloaded the logs. "Tracks heading east, rabbit, maybe deer. The forest opening back up." Mabel's stomach growled. Harlan heard it and chuckled. "Well, maybe that stew wasn't enough after all." Nora stood. "We'll need more anyway. The boy needs real food if he's going to regain strength." Harlan nodded. "I'll set traps. Be back by dusk." Before he left, he glanced at Wyatt. "You know how to shoot?" Wyatt hesitated, then nodded. "Pa taught me. A little." Harlan looked at him carefully. "Then come with me. You can learn more." Nora raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Wyatt hesitated again, then looked at Mabel. She was tucking a blanket around Jude's legs, humming something soft under her breath. "I'll go," he said. Harlan grabbed a spare rifle and handed it to the boy. It was heavier than Wyatt expected, and he nearly dropped it. "Don't worry," Harlan said. "We'll start with basics." They stepped into the snow. The cold stung, but it wasn't biting anymore. The forest stretched out in all directions, quiet, wide, and watchful. Harlan led the way through the trees, showing Wyatt how to spot prints, how to tell the difference between fresh snow and hidden ground. They moved slowly, stopping often to listen. "You ever kill anything before?" Harlan asked. Wyatt swallowed. "No. You will today." Wyatt didn't answer. After an hour of hiking, they found a set of fresh rabbit tracks near a tree stump. Harlan motioned for Wyatt to crouch. "Rifle up. Breathe slow. Wait until it moves." They waited. Minutes passed. Then, a flicker of motion. Wyatt exhaled, heart pounding. He took aim. The rifle cracked. The rabbit fell. Harlan didn't say anything. He just walked over, picked up the animal, and handed it to Wyatt. The boy stared at it, throat tight. "You don't have to like it," Harlan said. "You just have to respect it." Wyatt nodded. "I understand." They returned at dusk with 2 rabbits. Enough for stew. Inside, Jude had woken briefly. Mabel fed him broth while Nora changed his linens. His voice was thin, but he smiled when Wyatt walked in. "Did you get a bear?" he asked weakly. "2 bears," Wyatt said. "Small ones." Jude giggled softly, then drifted off again. That night they ate together around the table. The cabin was warm, the wind outside barely more than a whisper now. Wyatt glanced at Nora. "Why'd you help us?" She stirred her stew slowly. "Because I know what it's like to lose something you can't get back." Mabel looked up. "You lost someone?" Nora nodded. "A child. A son. Long time ago." Silence. Wyatt lowered his spoon. "I'm sorry." Harlan spoke next. "We wanted kids. Tried for years. But life doesn't always work the way you want. When she lost the baby, something in the house broke." Nora's voice was calm but low. "It was empty for a long time. Then you came along." Mabel's eyes brimmed with tears. "You think Jude's gonna make it?" "I do," Nora said. "But he'll need rest. And food. And time." Wyatt stood suddenly. "Then we'll work for it. I'll chop wood. Whatever you need." "You don't owe us labor," Harlan said. "I'm not doing it because I owe you," Wyatt replied. "I'm doing it because I want to." Harlan met his eyes and nodded. "Fair enough." Later that night, Wyatt sat by the fire alone, staring into the embers. The rifle rested beside him. It felt less foreign now, less like a stranger in his hands. Nora joined him with a blanket, draping it over his shoulders. "You don't have to protect them every second, Wyatt. That's not your job alone." "It is," he said. "You're just a boy. I wasn't given a choice." She sat beside him. "You're allowed to rest. Even soldiers rest." He looked at her then, for the first time really seeing her, not as a stranger but as someone who'd carried grief too. "Do you miss him?" he asked. She smiled sadly. "Every day. But helping your siblings, doesn't take that away. It just makes the silence feel less heavy." Wyatt nodded slowly. "I thought if I stopped moving, stopped fighting, I'd break." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you already survived the worst day of your life. The rest is just walking." He didn't respond. But when she rose and returned to her room, he stayed by the fire, staring at the coals until they turned to dust. And for the first time he felt something shift inside. Not hope. Not yet. But something like it. The days stretched out like golden thread, softening the sharp edges of survival. Snow melted slowly into the frozen earth, and green shoots began to peek from the frostbitten ground like secrets whispered from the soil. The forest stirred with life again, squirrels darting through pine limbs, birdsong returning in cautious bursts, and deer leaving fresh tracks in the thawing mud. The worst of winter had passed, but inside the cabin, the weight of what had been wasn't so quick to lift. Jude regained color first. He woke more often, stayed awake longer, and began asking questions. Endless, curious, bright-eyed questions that made Nora smile no matter how tired she was. He grew stronger with each spoonful of stew and sip of herbal tonic, though his legs still trembled when he tried to stand. Wyatt hovered close during those first attempts, arms always half extended, ready to catch. "Easy," he said each time. "Don't rush it." "I'm not," Jude replied once, teeth clenched, sweat beading at his temples. "I'm trying." "I know." Mabel had taken to following Nora everywhere, eager to help. She learned to wash linens with cold spring water, stir the fire to keep it burning evenly, and even picked up bits of Nora's healing craft, how to crush bark into powder or identify fever-reducing leaves. Her small fingers learned to be steady and purposeful. "I want to be a doctor when I grow up," she told Nora one afternoon, kneeling beside the drying herbs. "Or a midwife. Like you." Nora smiled as she clipped a sprig of yarrow. "You'd be a good one. You listen more than you talk." Mabel grinned. "You think so?" "I know so." Wyatt was quieter these days, not silent, but reflective. He spent long hours in the woods with Harlan, learning how to track, how to walk without leaving a trail, how to skin and clean what they caught. The man wasn't chatty, but Wyatt didn't need conversation. He needed someone to show him the rules of the world that lay beyond flight and fear. Harlan did that without frills. "Always check your wind," Harlan said once, crouching beside him in the early light. "Game smells you before it sees you." Wyatt nodded, absorbing each word, each gesture. It was strange, having someone who didn't treat him like a burden. Stranger still to realize he was enjoying the work. Back at the cabin, Nora noticed the changes in him. The way his back was straighter now, the way he looked her in the eye more often. The way he touched Jude's shoulder before he left each morning and listened to Mabel's endless chatter without snapping. There was still tension under his skin, still storms behind his eyes, but he was learning how to breathe through them. But peace, Nora knew, never lingered forever. It was a Tuesday when the rider came. Late afternoon. Sky gray with the promise of rain. The sound of hooves was soft at first, barely louder than the wind through the pines. But Wyatt heard it before anyone else. He stepped outside, rifle slung over his shoulder, and squinted into the tree line. A man on horseback, coat dusty, hat pulled low, rode toward the clearing. Alone, but with the look of someone who wasn't used to being questioned. Wyatt's grip on the rifle tightened. Nora came to the door behind him. "Friend of yours?" "No." The rider dismounted slowly. He didn't draw, but his hand hovered close to his holster. His boots crunched on the gravel as he approached. "Evening," he said. His voice was low, careful. "Name's Seth Rayner. I'm looking for 3 children." Wyatt's jaw clenched. "Why?" "They're wards of the county," Seth said. "Been missing nearly 2 months." "Who sent you?" Nora asked. "Judge Henley from Dry Hollow. He got word someone saw the kids headed into the North Woods. I've been riding circuit ever since." "We're not hiding," Wyatt said sharply. "We're surviving." Seth's gaze flicked to him. "I get that, son. But I'm not here to argue. I'm here to do what's right." "What's right?" Nora echoed. "And that means taking them back where?" "To the same system that failed them." Seth didn't flinch. "To shelter. Food. Education." Wyatt barked a bitter laugh. "You don't know what you're talking about. We were starved. Chased off. Jude almost died." Seth looked at him fully now. "And I'm sorry for that. But I can't leave kids out here in the woods, no matter how well-meaning the company." Nora stepped forward. "You'll have to go through me." Seth looked between them. "Ma'am? I don't want trouble." "Then don't bring any." Seth paused, considering. "You've taken care of them. I can see that. But the law's still the law. There's no justice in dragging them back to where they barely survived," Nora said. "We've given them a life here." "You've given them kindness," Seth admitted. "And I won't forget that. But I'll need to report what I found." Wyatt took a step closer. "What happens if we don't go back?" "Nothing, if I never saw you." It hung there, heavy, unsaid. Mabel had stepped outside now, clutching Jude's hand. The boy's knees still trembled, but he stood. Seth looked at them. Really looked. "I've got a boy," he said quietly. "Same age as him." Nora studied his face. "Then you understand." Seth sighed, took off his hat, and ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I was never good at paperwork anyway," he muttered. "Guess I'll ride on and say the tracks led west." Wyatt stared. "You mean it?" "Hell, son, I ain't heartless. Just cautious." Nora stepped forward and extended her hand. Seth shook it, firm and without hesitation. "You ever need supplies," she said, "you're welcome back. I just might take you up on that." He tipped his hat to the children. "You take care now." He turned, mounted his horse, and rode off into the darkening trees. Silence returned to the clearing. Jude slumped back against the doorway, exhausted. Mabel hugged him tightly. Wyatt stood frozen for a moment. Then, slowly, he walked to Nora and looked up at her. "You didn't have to protect us." Her voice was quiet. "Yes, I did." He swallowed hard. "You could have let him take us." "I won't ever let that happen." Jude murmured, "Are we safe now?" Nora kneeled beside him, brushing the hair from his forehead. "We're safe tonight. That's all we ever get. One night at a time." Inside, the fire was lit again, and dinner was boiled from what remained of the last hunt. No one spoke much, but the air had changed. Heavier in some ways, lighter in others. A choice had been made. A line crossed. After the children went to bed, Wyatt lingered near the hearth. Harlan sat across from him, polishing a knife. "He was right, you know," Wyatt said. "We don't belong here." Harlan glanced up. "You do now. But we're not yours." Harlan nodded. "Neither was this land once. Now we live on it, take care of it. That's what makes it ours." Wyatt leaned back, eyes on the flames. "You think it'll last?" "No," Harlan said. "Nothing ever does. But you hold on to the good while it's here." Outside, rain began to fall softly on the roof, a rhythm that lulled the night into peace. Inside the cabin, surrounded by walls that had once been too quiet for too long, a new silence settled. One filled not with emptiness but with belonging. Not yet home but close. The forest burned orange in the late spring dusk. Sunlight poured through the canopy in molten beams, casting long shadows over the clearing where the cabin stood, tucked against the hillside like it had always belonged there. Smoke rose from the chimney. A soft breeze danced through the trees. From a distance it looked like peace. But inside, everything was unraveling. Wyatt sat at the table, fists clenched, his eyes locked on the rifle leaning against the doorframe. Jude was in bed, pale again, a thin sheen of sweat on his brow. Mabel stood at the foot of the bed, wringing her hands, silent tears running down her cheeks. Nora pressed a damp cloth to the boy's forehead, her lips pressed in a thin, hard line. "He was fine yesterday," Wyatt said, voice tight. "He was fine." "He wasn't," Nora replied, not looking up. "The fever's back. This time deeper in the lungs." "He can't take more of this," Mabel whispered. Harlan returned from town less than an hour later, boots heavy with mud, coat dusted with road grit. His face was grim. Wyatt stood as soon as he entered. "Did you get the medicine?" Harlan's jaw flexed. "Store's out. Next shipment's due in a week. If the train makes it." "A week?" Wyatt shouted. "He won't survive a week." "There's a man in Bell Hollow," Nora said suddenly. "Old trapper. They say he knows the mountain herbs better than any living soul. If anyone has the root we need, it's him." Harlan exhaled. "That's a 2-day ride. And the trail's flooded from last week's rain." "Then I'll go," Wyatt said. Harlan shook his head. "You don't even know the route." "I'll learn fast." "You're not ready for that ride." Wyatt stepped forward, eyes burning. "I've hunted in storms. Carried Jude across snowdrifts. I've killed to keep them safe. Don't tell me what I'm not ready for." Silence filled the cabin. Mabel's sobs echoed in the stillness. Nora turned to Wyatt. "You won't make it in time alone. But maybe together. You'd come with me? I'd never send you into that trail by yourself. Not with the river high and the bridge out." Harlan grunted. "Then I'm coming too." Nora glanced at him. "Someone has to stay. If Jude gets worse." "I'll stay," Mabel said quietly. "I know the signs. I can watch him." Wyatt hesitated, torn between fear and determination. Then he crossed to Jude's bedside, crouched low, and took his brother's hand. "I'll be back," he whispered. "You just hold on." Jude blinked slowly. "You promise?" "I swear it." They rode out before sunrise, saddlebags packed light and tight. The trail wound through low valleys first, then lifted into the misted hills where pines towered above like sentinels. Rain began falling by mid-morning, light but relentless. Mud slicked the narrow path and the horses struggled for footing. Nora led the way, eyes sharp, every movement purposeful. They crossed a rickety footbridge just before noon, a stretch of broken boards and frayed rope. Wyatt's heart nearly stopped when Nora's horse slipped, but she steadied it, pressing forward without a word. Harlan brought up the rear, rifle ready, ears pricked for anything. Wild dogs had been seen up in these woods. Desperate things. Starving things. By dusk, they made camp under an overhang of rock, fire sputtering against the damp air. Wyatt chewed jerky with numb fingers, mind 1,000 miles away. Nora sat beside him, quiet for a long while before she spoke. "You remind me of someone," she said. "My brother. He was always trying to protect everyone. Thought he could hold the world together with both hands." "What happened to him?" "He drowned trying to save a boy from a frozen lake." Wyatt swallowed. "Did the boy live?" "No," her voice broke on the word. "Two graves. Side by side. That's when I stopped believing in the idea that sacrifice alone could save people." Wyatt looked into the fire. "Then why help us?" "Because not helping would have killed me more than anything else ever did." Sleep came in fits, full of shadowy dreams and faint cries in the dark. At first light they mounted again. Bell Hollow was a ghost town. Just a scattering of cabins along the high ridge. Smoke rose from one chimney, just one. They approached with caution, rifles out. An old man opened the door. His beard was a tangle of white, his eyes glassy but sharp. "I know why you're here," he said before they even spoke. "Word travels faster than horses in these parts." "We need fever root," Nora said. "I've got some. Dried and sealed. You'll need to boil it strong." Wyatt stepped forward. "We'll pay. Whatever it costs." The man shook his head. "Don't want money. Just promise me something." "What?" "Tell people I'm not dead yet." Wyatt blinked. "All right. Deal." They rode hard on the way back, cutting across paths slick with runoff and dodging fallen limbs. By the time they reached the flooded river, the sun was sinking and the trail was nearly lost. The bridge was gone. Water roared below, churning brown and fast. "We can't ford this," Harlan said. "Not on horseback." "There's another way," Nora muttered, scanning the tree line. "Old logging trail. But it's steep. Dangerous. We don't have a choice, Wyatt said. They turned east, pushing through overgrowth and narrow ledges until the trail barely resembled a path. At one point, Nora's horse stumbled, nearly going over the edge. Harlan caught the reins just in time. It was near midnight when the cabin's lights came into view, flickering behind trees. Wyatt didn't wait. He slid from his horse and ran the last stretch on foot, bursting through the door. Mabel turned from the bedside. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. He stopped breathing for a minute, she said, voice cracking. But he's still holding on. Nora took the fever root and immediately began boiling water, adding herbs with practiced precision. The room filled with sharp, earthy smells. Hold his head, she instructed. Wyatt sat beside his brother, lifting him gently. Come on, Jude. Just a little longer. The brew was poured into a cup. Nora fed it to the boy in slow sips, one after another. Then they waited. 1 hour. Then 2. Finally, just before dawn, Jude stirred. His eyes opened, clear for the first time in days. Wyatt. Wyatt leaned close, trembling. I'm here. I dreamed you didn't come back. I always come back. Nora exhaled, her shoulders sagging. Mabel broke down crying, sobbing into the covers. Outside, morning painted the trees gold. Birds began to sing. Later, when the fire was fresh and breakfast was cooking, Harlan sat with a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise. Wyatt stood beside him. He's going to live, Wyatt said. Harlan nodded. He is. Because we fought for him. Because you refused to give up. Wyatt looked back at the cabin, where Jude lay sleeping, Mabel beside him. I think we finally made it, he said softly. Harlan grunted. Made it through one storm. There'll be others. I'm not scared anymore. You were never scared. Just tired. Wyatt looked up at the sky. The clouds were gone. The wind was warm. We're not orphans anymore, he said. No, Harlan replied. You're not. And in that moment, as the sun rose over the edge of the wild, a new day began, not just in the land, but in the hearts of those who had once been left to freeze and die. They were no longer abandoned. No longer just surviving. They had found a home. Together.